All right, let's jump right in, because today we are diving deep into something pretty fascinating. Uh, Emotional well-being.
Hmm.
Specifically, this thing called TRANKIS, right?
Yep.
And you've given us a ton of stuff to go through on this. We're talking research articles, like the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, it's a real mix, and that's what makes it so interesting, right? You've clearly been looking at this from, like, every angle.
Oh, absolutely. And it's no secret, mental health is, well, it's a big deal these days, globally even. I feel like every day there's a new article about how stress levels are through the roof. It's like we're living in a mental health crisis, or so they say. But here's what really struck me. 65%, a whole 65% of people, and this is worldwide, will experience some kind of emotional disorder at some point. I mean, we're talking like it's almost more likely to happen than not.
It's a pretty startling statistic when you think about it that way, and it really drives home, I think, the need for some kind of support system that actually works, something that's actually accessible. And that's where this whole Trankis thing comes in, right?
You got it. That's
Yeah.
where this whole deep dive gets really interesting. Just imagine for a second if you had this virtual assistant, right? And it was there for you like 24/7, but it was completely focused on like your emotional well-being.
Mm.
That's essentially what this whole Trankis thing is trying to be.
Wow. It's like a support system you just carry around with you right there in your pocket, always there to listen and maybe offer a little guidance, I guess.
Exactly. And from what I've seen in these articles, it seems like Trankis, it does more than just lend an ear. It's got personalized assessments, these wellness plans that are like tailored to you. It can even connect you with like actual resources and professionals if you need them.
Sounds like they're trying to bridge that gap, the one between self-help and actually going to a professional. It's like a whole spectrum of support, depending on what you need, right?
Okay, so let's paint a picture here, right? Say you're feeling super overwhelmed, anxious even. You open up Trankis, and maybe it walks you through some breathing exercises, or like helps you reframe some of those negative thoughts swirling around in your head, or maybe just suggests a meditation app you can try. The whole point is to give you the tools to manage those big emotions right when you're feeling them.
And if those tools aren't enough, it sounds like Trankis can also like connect you with actual therapists, even support groups. So it does add in that human element when you really need it.
Exactly. It's not about replacing human interaction altogether.
Right.
It's more like enhancing it with, well, with technology.
Yeah.
But here's where things get even more interesting, at least to me. Trankis, they're not just going after, like, us, individuals. They're aiming way bigger. We're talking businesses, whole organizations, even healthcare providers themselves.
That's interesting. So it's like they're acknowledging that emotional well-being, it's not just a personal thing, right? It's like a whole societal issue we got to deal with.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, think about the impact this could have on how productive people are at work,
Yeah.
employee morale. Heck, even things like how often people call out sick. If Trankis can help even a small percentage of employees feel just a little more supported, I mean, it could have this ripple effect, right? You could change entire organizations from the inside out.
Yeah.
And you know what else? They're even teaming up with insurance companies and healthcare providers.
Oh, wow. See, now that's huge. I mean, imagine if your insurance, actually covered not just therapy, but also gave you access to Trankis for, ongoing support between sessions.
Right, like having a whole team in your corner, from coaches to therapists, all working together to, help you be your best self. Okay, but let's back up for a sec. You mentioned earlier this whole four-pillar approach to emotional wellness that Trankis uses. Where do they even get that from?
So they're actually drawing inspiration from a bit of a rock star in the emotional intelligence world. This guy, Daniel Goleman, he's done some really groundbreaking stuff on, how we can understand and actually manage our emotions better.
Okay, so this isn't just some random self-help fluff then. This is actually rooted in real research and expertise. I like that. But for those of us who haven't exactly devoured all of Goldman's books, what do these pillars actually mean in practice?
So think of it kind of like this. Each pillar is like this key area of emotional well-being, right? You've got awareness, which is all about being in tune with your emotions, knowing how they affect you and all that. Then there's regulation, which is I don't know, having a toolbox full of techniques to manage those feelings, especially when things get, a little hairy.
So not about suppressing emotions, but more like learning how to navigate them in a healthy way.
Exactly. Then you've got motivation, which is all about tapping into that inner drive, finding your purpose and all that good stuff. And last but not least, relationships. Because let's be real, the people we surround ourselves with, they play a huge role in how we feel emotionally.
Wow. It's like they've created this roadmap for building, I don't know, emotional resilience, and they're hitting all the major points along the way. But how does Trankis actually like walk someone through this? It's not just a lecture on emotional intelligence, is it?
Oh, no, not even close. From what I've seen in these materials, they use all sorts of cool techniques. Think like guided meditations to boost your awareness, cognitive behavioral exercises for, getting a handle on anxiety, even prompts to help you communicate better in your relationships.
So it's interactive, it's personalized, and it's constantly adapting to your needs as you go. That's impressive.
Yeah, it really is. And you know what's really striking? The range of issues they're tackling. I mean, we're talking everything from everyday stress and anxiety to like more serious challenges like uh, personality disorders, OCD, even ADHD.
Wow, that is quite a spectrum.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder how they tailor the experience for each individual, right? It's got to have like specific modules or pathways depending on what you're dealing with.
That's exactly what it sounds like. I mean, the materials mention specialized care for like addiction, eating disorders, even couples therapy. It seems like they've really tried to create something that can address a ton of different needs, all within this one platform.
It's like having a whole library of resources right there at your fingertips, but it's all curated and personalized based on what you've got going on. This could be huge, especially for folks who like don't have access to traditional therapy, or maybe they're just, a little hesitant to reach out for help.
You've hit on something really important there, I think. I mean, there's still this stigma around mental health, right? So for some people, the idea of like confiding in an AI, it might feel way less intimidating than actually talking to, another human being.
It's like taking that first step, that initial outreach. It can be the hardest part sometimes. And if Trankis can be that, like that safe space, that accessible entry point, it could be really powerful for people.
Oh, totally agree. And, while they're very upfront about the fact that Trankis isn't a replacement for a therapist or anything, it could be a super valuable tool for like early intervention, giving someone the support and guidance they need right when they need it most, especially if they're not sure where else to turn.
Speaking of guidance, there was something else that caught my eye. The whole Trankis for Teens thing. Seems like they've put a lot of effort into making this work for a younger audience. What's the thinking there?
Well, think about it. Adolescence is like prime time for emotional development, right? It's this period of like massive change. And it can also be when a lot of mental health stuff, first starts to show up.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to get ahead of the curve, trying to provide support during those critical years when it can make the biggest difference.
Exactly. And they're not just like slapping a new coat of paint on the adult version and calling it a day. They've really thought about what teens need, what they respond to, and they've designed it accordingly.
So no stuffy therapist language or like talking down to teenagers.
Not at all. From what I'm reading, Trankis takes on this much more casual, relatable persona when it's interacting with teens. It even throws in things like music recommendations, pop culture references, just to make the whole experience feel less clinical and more, well, more their speed.
That's really smart. It's all about meeting them where they're at, right?
Yeah.
Speaking their language, using their interests, and basically just making emotional well-being seem less scary and more like a normal part of life. It really does feel like they've cracked some kind of code, making this whole mental wellness thing actually appealing to teenagers. But it brings up a much bigger question for me, one I've been kind of turning over this whole time. How effective can AI really be with something as, I don't know, as complex and nuanced as our emotional well-being? I mean, we're talking about feelings here, right? The human experience. Can an algorithm really grasp all that?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer, well, it's kind of like most things, I guess. It's complicated. On the one hand, we've got this crazy, powerful technology that can process information like it's nothing, right? Personalized recommendations, learns from tons of data. It's like the super brain that never gets tired or makes, those human errors.
Right, like you can look at all this data about, I don't know, our sleep patterns, how active we are, even our social media use. Maybe it can see the warning signs of stress or anxiety, before we even do.
Exactly. And it can be there, right, to offer that support and guidance when we need it most, like when we feel totally overwhelmed or lost. But, there are two sides to every coin.
And that's what I'm wondering about. What about the limitations? What can't AI do in these situations?
Well, for starters, AI is only as good as the information it learns from, right? So if the data itself is biased or incomplete, the AI's responses, they're going to reflect that. And then there's that whole thing about empathy, intuition.
Yeah, that human touch.
Mm.
Can AI really understand, like, what it feels like to have your heart broken or experience grief or even just that feeling of anxiety that seems to come out of nowhere sometimes?
That's the core of it, I think. AI can learn to recognize patterns and respond in a certain way, but it can't replicate what we feel, the depth and complexity of human emotion. It's not going to give you a hug when you need one or, just listen while you cry it out.
And let's not forget how vital human interaction is in therapy in
Yeah,
general. Sometimes just talking to another person, somebody who gets it, someone who listens without judgment, it can be so healing in itself.
100%.
So yeah, well, Trankis and other AI tools like it, they can be incredibly useful. They can really help us on this journey to better emotional well-being. We've got to remember they're just tools. They can help, they can support what we're already doing, but they can't replace human connection entirely. And they definitely can't replace professional help when it's needed.
It's all about finding that balance then, embracing what technology can do, but also being real about its limits, right? And never underestimating the power of human connection and expertise. So, where does this all leave us? It feels like we're standing at the edge of something brand new, something with a ton of potential, but also a lot to figure out. Pretty exciting time to be alive, don't you think? I mean, we're seeing a whole new field emerge right before our eyes. And it has the potential to totally change how we think about and approach mental health, emotional well-being, the whole thing.
It's like we're holding the future in our hands right now. And it's full of possibilities, sure, but also some pretty big challenges. And as we move into this unknown territory, I think we've got to ask ourselves some tough questions. What do we want the role of AI to be in our lives? Especially when it comes to something as personal and as important as our emotions, right? And how do we make sure these tools are being used responsibly, ethically? How do we make sure that people's well-being is always the top priority?
Big questions, important questions, and I don't think there are any easy answers. But if there's one thing I'm sure of, it's that this conversation, it's just getting started.
And on that note, we're going to leave you with one last thought to chew on. Is this whole Trankis thing, is this a glimpse into the future of emotional wellness? A world where AI gives us the power to take control of our own mental health? Or is it a step too far? Like, are we blurring the lines between technology and the human experience in a way that deserves a closer look, a little more caution? We want to know what you think. Hit us up on our socials. Let us know your take on Trankis and the future of AI and mental health. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing and keep diving deep.